The trust we put in strangers doesn't make them angels. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but this is about the Elodie Morel case. Now, we all know that the internet is a dangerous place to trust. And so when it begins to leak into the real world, we have to expect the darkness to come with it. And unfortunately, this case is an example of that. By the way, if you didn't know, I post so much content like this. It is truly my passion to talk about these victims, to get them justice, to spread light to their cases. So if you do enjoy this type of content, I would love your support so I can continue doing this by subscribing, by sharing, by thumbsing up, or just leaving a nice comment down below. It all means so much to me that you guys care enough about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. So yeah, let's get back to the story. So this all began in France of 2005 when a 28-year-old woman named Elodie Morel worked as a waitress at different restaurants and bars. She had done that her whole life. She lived in Marseille at this point, and she had a husband and a 4-year-old little boy. But she wanted more out of her life than to just be a waitress. Her real dream was fashion, specifically to model it, and everybody had always told her that she would be a great model. She was such a natural beauty. The problem was she was 28 and had zero experience. She had never even gotten her picture taken by a real professional photographer. But she was determined to make this her career. So that April, she joined a modeling casting website where she posted her photos, and she began to look through all the jobs and apply for anyone that she could come across. Weeks went by and she was unable to find anything. She was applying and nothing was happening. No one was getting back to her, and she was slowly getting more and more discouraged. And then late April, a post showed up of a fashion photographer named Nicole Forestier. She was a well-known photographer who worked for the company Ducas, and she wanted models for a campaign for Rolls-Royce. They were offering a full expenses-paid 5-day trip and photo shoot for 3 models to go to Come On. They would be paid 1,000 euros per day from May 3rd to May 7th. Knowing it was a very small chance she would actually get this job, she applied anyway, and shortly after got an email saying she had actually been chosen as one of the models. But unfortunately, this isn't the story of a girl whose dreams came true. Because on May 2nd, the day before she was supposed to leave for this trip, the Aigues-Mortes police station received a call. It was 5:45 p.m. and 63-year-old Dominic Tarasco was on the other line. He wanted to talk to his friend who was a police officer because he feared a man who had just left his place was going to commit a crime, that he was going to kidnap a girl. He said he was armed and about to do something horrific, and that there would soon be a couple at the bar and the woman would be in distress, but the police needed to act quickly. Dominic also hinted at pimping and prostitution, but when the police asked him for more, urged him to give them a name of the man, he refused, saying that it would cost him his life. He wanted them to go to the bar and arrest him quietly without ever giving his name. But he could give the kind of car this man would be driving, a green Seat Ibiza. With what little info they had, they began to prepare on what they should do. But poor little Elodie had no idea. She had gotten that email. She was so excited. She began emailing back and forth with Nicole and was just completely in shock about the whole thing. Nicole told Elodie she had the complete look they were looking for, and that she was so excited to meet her. This whole time, Elodie would talk between Nicole and Nicole's assistant, Elon McQuest, and everything was going really well. And they even said, okay, we're going to meet up on May 3rd, but why don't we meet up May 2nd, the day before, just to have a meeting, make sure everything's going according to plan, make sure you're comfortable. And she was, of course, ecstatic to have one more day with these huge modeling influences in her life that could make a huge difference. So it was set up for 6 p.m. on May 2nd at the Stopover Bar in Aigues-Mortes, and Elodie was the happiest she had been in years. The night prior to the meeting, she packed a small bag with clothes and shoes and items to take with her on the photo shoot, And then the next morning, the morning of the meeting, she dressed in skinsing jeans, a white billowy top, a cream-colored knit sweater, and a pair of high heels, and she headed out. She even headed out early to make sure she wasn't late. She was beyond excited, and she was headed in her black 1995 BMW sedan, but she had no idea what awaited her. Thankfully, the police did, and they had people stationed in the car, in the corners of the bar, at the bar, all over the place looking for this couple. Except this was a very busy time, and there were couples everywhere. And with no description, they had no idea who to rule out. After no sign of anyone in distress, they called Dominic back and said, look, we need more information. We don't know what to look for. We have no idea. And he said he still could not give them any more information. And that's when they went over the same information he'd given them before, to see if they could get him to say any more, or to see if anything was wrong, perhaps. Maybe they'd written something down wrong. And that is when Dominic realized he had given the wrong description of the vehicle. It was actually a gray ZX that they were looking for. And even though it was suspicious that he was now changing his story, that he didn't want to tell all the information, people in town really trusted him because he was a local scrap merchant and also owned a bar. And he had helped police catch numerous car thieves and local drug dealers, and he was just very well known for being a good guy. But in this case, since he couldn't say more and there was nothing the police found that was out of the ordinary at this bar, the case was dropped. But Dominic didn't know that they had dropped the case. He thought that they were still out looking with the information he told them, and so he went out to dinner that night, was drinking, and was headed home when he came across a traffic stop. He figured it was for the man and the woman looking for the car, and so he ran up to these police officers, was asking if they'd found anything, was being really loud and abrupt, and police officers on the scene had no idea about his phone call. They weren't the ones who had looked at the bar, and so they were very confused, just thought he was a loud drunk and was trying to usher him off the scene so they could do the traffic stop. And this is when Dominic said that he saw a gray ZX, like he had said the man would be in, with a woman who was slumped over in the passenger seat. And they drove by. Dominic screamed at the police, "That's him, do something!" But they had no idea what he was talking about, thought he was drunk, and ushered him away. And that is when Dominic looked at his phone that was ringing and saw that the man that he had said was going to kidnap this girl was calling him. He answered it, and this man said that he needed to be careful going home because there were cops everywhere. This man had not seen Dominic and did not know he had called the police on him. Nobody was listening to Dominic now, and the case was just done, over with. Nobody wanted to deal with it anymore because they figured it wasn't real. But then 2 days later, on May 4th, a 25-year-old man showed up at the Marseille police station. He tells them his wife is missing and has been for 48 hours. And her name is Elodie Morel. And on May 2nd at 9:30 p.m., he received the last text from her. And it said, "Big kiss, everything is going well. I'll call you tomorrow when I can. Hugs and kisses, talk later." And after that, her phone was turned off. But the officer who was talking to her husband didn't really want to listen because he had gotten out of this husband that they had actually been having marital problems and had recently filed for divorce. So this officer just said, look, she's probably just, out with another man and doesn't want to talk to you, or maybe she just doesn't want to talk to you in general, and we're not going to do anything because it's her right to do whatever she wants as an adult and it's not your problem. But the husband continued to push, so much so that there ended up being a nationwide search for her. The police in Aigues-Mortes were faxed a paper of this missing woman and the day she went missing and connected the two. This woman went missing the same day as they went looking for a woman who was supposed to be abducted. Maybe they're the same. They knew this was no coincidence, so they called and got the number of Elodie's mobile and sent it out to be traced, the pings to be traced of where she called from. And it showed that she had been in the Aigues-Mortes area at the time, and then later that night, the pings just stopped. Her phone had been turned off. Her husband said she was a very strong-willed woman and that she would have fought back any attacker, and that's when the police got even more worried that if she had done that, the attacker may have ended her life already. And with the severity of the case, on May 5th, they brought in Dominic, the initial phone caller, and interrogated him because he still was not giving up a name. They interrogated him so hard that he began to cry, and then he finally said the name of the man that he suspected did something bad. Yo Mengo. He was a 49-year-old security guard who worked in Dominic's nightclub, and he had a criminal record. He had been convicted of sexually assaulting two 20-year-old tourists. He had picked them up because they were hitchhiking and did the unspeakable. He was caught and sentenced to 9 years for that, and when he got out, he was in and out of the jail for possessing firearms. He was the type of person known to explode if he was refused anything, and the police knew they had to work fast, and they were going to use Dominic to do it. Dominic was going to set up a meeting with Yu in an abandoned nightclub parking lot at 6 p.m. Yu agreed, but said he would be coming with someone. When 6 p.m. came, the police were all set up inside. He pulled up in a van and he got out and he started to head inside when he noticed the police. He began to run, but the police caught up with him and brought him to the ground. When Yu was searched, they found Elodie's bank card in his pocket, but he denied knowing where she was at all, knowing who she was, and saying that he found the card at the nightclub and was going to return it to her. His partner that had come with him was named Rashal, and he had no criminal record and was actually a family man in the area. He was interrogated first, and the first thing he said was that Yeo was a family friend and that he would just come stay with him when he was in the area. They rushed to search Rashal's home, and when they got there, they found his wife and daughter eating peacefully at the kitchen table, and they didn't stop as the police searched their home. They just continued to eat like it was none of their business. But while Elodie was not inside, her belongings were. They found her dressing gown, 2 pairs of shoes, and a black top. But the most incriminating evidence was Elodie's cell phone, as well as a hidden revolver which had what appeared to be bloodstains on it. And Yeo just shrugged when the police showed it to him, and that is when they decided to arrest everyone in the home and bring them in. And that same day at 8 p.m. they were all brought into the police station and placed in separate interrogation rooms. Yeo Mango continued to say he had nothing to do with it, and that he had in fact met Elodie at the bar, but she had just simply left her card, which is why he had it, and he had no idea what happened after that. They could see Yeo was a master manipulator, and their interrogation techniques were not going to work on him. So that's when they turned to his partner, Rashal, and his wife, who he had been staying with. And Rashal was much easier to get under the skin of. The investigator whispered in his ear, saying, "I know that you know what has happened. It wasn't you, but you know." And he responded with, "Yes." And then began to say that Yeo came to his house on May 1st and just kind of barged in like he normally does, telling all of his fictional crazy stories about his life and saying that he was on to something big. He admitted that he had a contract with another prisoner, that he would get $5,000 if he killed somebody. And then he pulled the revolver out of his bag. Rashal then told police he left about 9 p.m. that night and didn't return until the 3rd. It was around 6 a.m. when he burst through the door saying he had done something stupid and waving his revolver around. Then he said he had a girl in the car and that he needed to use the garage. So Rashal went out, unlocked the garage, and gave Yeo the cable ties he had asked for, and then left, even more terrified of Yeo than he had been before. Yeo came back later that night into the house asking for water for the girl who had sniffed the white powder. And then about a few hours after that, he came back in for dinner and had Elodie's belongings, which he gave to the family. He told them he couldn't just get rid of her because she could incriminate him. And when Rashal asked how he could get rid of her, he made a choking gesture and said like this. But while in interrogation, when Yeo found out that Rashal had turned against him, he finally decided to confess. He said that he had set up a fake modeling agency post and he had been the one to email Elodie. He was pretending to be Nicole Forestier. Io said, "I received an email from Miss Elodie, and when I read it, I had like a flash. I said to myself, why not her?" He told them he then set up a meeting with Elodie at this bar, and when he got there, he explained to Elodie that he was Nicole's assistant and that she had sent him because she was busy getting ready for the photo shoot, and after a while of convincing, she seemed like she was okay with it. After a while of talking, he then said he could take her on a little tour of all the places where the photos would be taken, and he still said he only wanted to take her bank card. And once he got to the point where he was on a road that was kind of out of town, he pulled off and he was going to take the card from her, but she began fighting back. So he hit her violently and she then gave him her PIN. But after that, he said he let her go. And although police let him believe that they believed him, they did not. And they went to search the garage. They found bloody footprints, cable ties that were cut and disconnected, and a water bottle which they took DNA samples from. They also found more than 30 cigarette butts on the floor, the same brand that Io smoked. But the most incriminating evidence was the traces of blood found all over the floor. Outside in the car, they found the bag of the white powder made of many different drug sedatives. But when Io was confronted with all this evidence, he still denied it. But he did change his story again, saying that on May 3rd, he had gone to the garage with Elodie to discuss what they were going to do with the bank card. He said if she would just let him have it, he would let her go. He said he never tied her up. They were both just in the garage, locked in there together. And once she agreed, next morning they headed back to the bar and stopped about halfway where he told Elodie that she could drive back to the bar. And so they went out to switch, and that is when Elodie tripped him. He said he then became furious as he fell to the ground and he grabbed a cord that he found and strangled Elodie. He ended his new statement with, "I still don't know why she tripped me," with no emotion whatsoever. And after a while they got him to tell them where the car was at the cemetery and that her body was in the trunk. And unfortunately, this was the real version of the story. They found her body and her cause of death was in fact strangulation. She also had bruising on her head and cable tie marks on her wrists. And the sample test from the water bottle came back to be a mixture of sperm and Elodie's saliva. Io was still saying that her death was an accident, but he was charged with rape, abduction, and murder. 3 years later, on January 28th of 2008, they went to court. Io, Rachel, and his wife. Io was smiling and he decided to say that Rachel was actually the killer. This surprised Rachel so much that he actually collapsed. The trial had to be postponed because of that, but Io's plan for him accusing Rachel of being the killer to get him out of it did not work whatsoever. When the trial began again, he was still being looked at as the killer, and so that's when he tried something different. To say that he was in love with Elodie and he could never have harmed her. But everyone knew that wasn't true. Rachel and his wife were asked why they never intervened with any of this, why they didn't speak up, and they said they simply just didn't ever see anything. 5 days later, they were sentenced to 6 years in prison. But Io Mango was given a life sentence, and after an appeal, Rachel and his wife had their sentence increased to 8 years. Why do you believe they did nothing to help her? Were they that terrified of Io? Did they really not see anything? Or did they simply just not want to deal with it? That makes me sick to think about. But do you think that Io ever planned to let Elodie go, or was it his plan all along to end her life? Do you think Dominic, if he would have told them who the man was, if he would have given more information, do you think she'd still be alive today? There are so many factors that go into this that could have changed the outcome if somebody had just spoken up. Yes, Dominic did speak up, but he only half spoke up. He wasn't willing to go the full way to save this woman's life. He only wanted to give a little bit of it, which, I mean, thankfully he did that so they know who killed her. If he could have prevented the death from happening, why didn't he do it? And it just makes me wonder if he has to live with that guilt his whole life, if he feels it, or if he just doesn't care at all, which I hope isn't the case. But I just felt a need to share this story with you guys because we do live on the internet and these things can happen, and even though we see them all the time and everybody knows the internet can be a dangerous place, you don't really think about it. You think since it has evolved so much that everybody's on it that it's safer, but it's not. It's probably even more dangerous now, and we still need to be aware of what we're doing, and our internet friends can still turn out to be nothing like we hoped, and people just are never what they seem, especially when it's through a screen. I just want you all to be aware of what you're doing out there and to let it be known, to show you right now that speaking up fully and even in fear is so much better and can do so much good and could save lives. So yeah, I know this was kind of a tough one and it's not the kind of ending I was hoping for when I started researching it, but it does happen, and at least I could spread light to her story and let people know what happened to this poor girl. So please don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye. Dreams come true if safety also makes a debut.